Welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is the fourth out of 6 webinars to introduce new UNDG guidance on communications and advocacy. I am Peter Sereni, Communications and KM Specialist at the Development Operations Coordination Office, which is the Secretariat of the UN Development Group. I am joined today by Maria Blanco, who is also Communications and Knowledge Management Specialist here at DOCA. We're really pleased to have so many of you online today. We had about 59 registrants, and we have about 20 attendees so far, and we expect more to trickle in throughout the course of this presentation. Today we will talk about the entry points for communications and advocacy in the new UNDAF companion piece guidance. That's the focus of today's webinar. So my brief presentation will take about, I think, about 15 to 20 minutes. We wanted to present the material to you first and then give you an opportunity to weigh in with your questions and comments. Please feel free to use the questions box to put your questions in at any point during the course of my presentation. And I should say that this is really not only my presentation, this is really a joint presentation by Maria and myself. She played a big role on putting this together as well. So onward and upward. Now let me just get to the next slide. Yes, okay. So this slide is aimed to sort of put us all in the spirit of what this presentation will be about today. It's to remind us that participation and public engagement are key for the 2030 agenda. As you know, this is a fundamentally different agenda than the MDGs. Through the World We Want national consultations and the My World Survey, over 10 million people expressed their priorities and had their voices heard through this process. So this is really, these are everyone's goals. And now we must use the opportunity to build upon this momentum. And really, there are lots of strong entry points for participatory communications. And this presentation is really about how to go about doing that. This slide is meant to show you that this agenda is incredibly interlinked. This slide requires a little bit of explanation so you understand what it's all about. I think it's you'll agree it's a beautiful, colorful representation. It is here represented are 837 interagency groups at country level, which sit across 131 country teams. And all of these groups are working on different aspects of this interconnected agenda. And the lines represent the interlinkages that show that, you know, a group might be working on quality education, but then at the same time also on no poverty, and in particular, so you see that this agenda is not divisible. It's a whole, and it's incredibly interlinked, and it means that we need to work in new ways, to think in interlinked ways when we go about communications and advocacy. This slide is meant to show the main pieces of UNDG guidance which will be in play today. The first one is the United Nations Development Assistance Framework Guidance, which was launched last year. And there are many entry points in this new guidance for participatory communications. To support the guidance, if you look at the blue part of the slide, we have two new pieces of guidance on communications and advocacy. The first one is fulfilling the promises, a practical guide for UN advocacy to promote implementation of the SDG agenda. And that was really the subject of the first 3 webinars in this series. And today we're going to focus on the second piece on the right-hand side, the communications and advocacy companion piece, UNDAF companion piece. But altogether, these pieces of guidance represent key UN system response to the new agenda. And of course, we also have the communicating as one guidance, which is, which these new pieces of guidance complement. And just to remind us all, there are 2 core elements as a part of communicating as one. The first is the UN Communications Group, and the second is the Joint Communications Strategy. This is sort of key communications architecture, which forms a basis for everything that we're going to talk about today. This slide is meant to show that communications sits within 6 other pillars of the standard operating procedures for countries adopting the delivering as one approach. And what you will see here, I think, and this is really a testament to all of your good work, that we've made a lot of progress on communications. It's one of the more successful standard operating procedures. If you look and see in pink, 65% of UNCTs have fully implemented the communicating as one SOP. We have a little animation for you, and this slide shows that in terms of communication groups, you are all sharing leadership on joint communication groups. It shows which UN agencies are leading UN communication groups and how many groups they are leading. So it's really a shared role and a shared responsibility. Now we're going to dive into the meat of this, the UNDAF companion piece, and we're going to unpack this in terms of, what do we mean when we say integrating communications and advocacy into the UNDAF process. We're going to break it down into 4 elements, in the UNDAF design stage, in the UNDAF development stage, in the UNDAF implementation stage, and in the UNDAF monitoring and evaluation stage. We have this colorful rendition of what I've just talked about, and don't feel like you have to now start poring over the small print. We will unpack all of this for you now. Yeah, and we will return to this later as I want to talk a little bit about the roadmap, but first I want to talk about the design and development stage in particular. So we'll first, the first step in the UNDAF design stage is really, rolling out the common and doing the common country assessment, which the guidance says is the independent and mandate-based articulation of the country context, opportunities, and challenges. This is really a key moment for participatory communications, to promote public participation and national ownership, and this idea that we aim to leave no one behind in the process. You can play, all of us can play a key role in identifying and engaging key audiences when the common country assessment is being done, to make sure that it reflects the voices of the most excluded and marginalized communities, and to ensure that a proper country analysis that provides an accurate sense of their needs and put people's perceptions on par with the mass of statistical data, which is often typically used in the common country assessment. So to make this more practical, maybe you want to do a survey or an SMS poll, or to reach out to people you don't normally have engaged before, vulnerable groups, LGBTI people, for example. And the idea is to use their perceptions to influence and change the way we do programming at the country level. In terms of the next stage in the UNDAF design stage is the Vision 2030, which is ultimately a document that addresses how the 5-year UNDAF fits into the 15-year 2030 agenda. And it really is another opportunity for effective communications and advocacy. It can be used, this Vision 2030 paper, to identify advocacy goals and to promote a public understanding of them. These goals, so you're looking at the 5-year UNDAF cycle within the context of the 2030 agenda. It's an opportunity to help shape, a multi-year advocacy plan towards achieving the 2030 agenda that is embedded in the joint communication strategy. The next stage in the process, just to go back, so now we're moving on to the development stage in green on this slide, and I'll show that again in a moment. In the UNDAF development stage, so this is really when the UNDAF is being formulated, put together on a very practical level, and it's an opportunity for you as communications colleagues to engage, to engage the UN communications group to find entry points for communications at the UNDAF outcome level. So there are 3 ways in which to look at this. This can involve advocacy, social mobilization, or behavioral change. So for example, if your goal is to end child marriage or to reduce child marriage, maybe you need an advocacy strategy convincing political leaders to pass a law. Or maybe you need a behavioral change campaign educating families about the negative consequences of marrying off girls before they become adults. So that's one key thing, is to think about the entry points for communications and advocacy at the UNDAF outcome stage. Then comes budgeting for communications and advocacy is a really critical element as well. A budget should be allocated for communications at the development stage, just like any other UNDAF area. And thirdly, it's a real moment to establish monitoring and an evaluation framework that also can contain clear indicators for measuring communications and advocacy activities. And it's important here to include communication targets and their contribution to the achievement of UNDAF outcomes. So, okay, so we've gone through the first 2 stages, the design and the development stage. And if you notice on this picture, we have a white swoosh, sort of a U shape, which is to indicate that it is important to also come up with a communications roadmap, which basically articulates in a very clear way how you will use communications and advocacy in the design and development stage, touching on the points that I have just explained in the previous couple of slides. Now we're going to move on to the implementation stage of the UNDAF, and really the key thing here is the joint communication strategy. Excuse me, just grabbing a little water, is the joint communication strategy, as well as the work plan for each year of the UNDAF. Basically here, the implementation stage is a key moment when communications can support programmatic objectives, and that's really what we're getting to here. So that communications is not an afterthought, but it's a strategic tool that's used to bolster and support program. Aligning communications objectives with program objectives also, I should add, facilitates monitoring and evaluation of the communication strategy later on. So it's an important thing to do at this stage. And here, this slide is meant to advocate for all of us to take advantage of UN coordination mechanisms in the UNDAF implementation stage. So here we have the UN Communications Group on the left. We also have the, actually in Spanish, I think, the results groups. I forgot to change that. The results groups. And, you know, if you have a, you know, for your results groups, try to be involved in their annual planning and the development of their work plan. The communications focal points of the leading agency of the results group can take this role. This will provide an opportunity to develop activities that will, you know, use funding, and it's an opportunity by linking with the results groups. You can better secure and marshal funding for the UNCG work plan. And here we have a slide which I'd just like Maria to speak to a little bit. She was the one that originated this slide, as well as a number of many others. Maybe, Maria, you can just speak to sort of how actually what I just said a moment ago is implemented in this slide.
Great, thank you, Peter. So, good morning, everyone. So, from the slide, you can see it's kind of like a recap and also a way to show how all the pieces come together. So, we have an UNDAF. You all know an UNDAF has, like, in general, a duration of like around 5 years, and the UNDAF has, of course, in general, like 3 to 6 outcomes. And those outcomes are being implemented through the results groups every year, right? So you have like your outcomes and at the UNDAF level, and then the outcomes are transformed into outputs that are managed by the results groups. In general, the idea is that each outcome will have a result group, but of course that changes in each country. So we have the UNDAF, we have the results groups, and the communications strategy will, as Peter has been explaining, it will be supporting the UNDAF implementation. No? The same way the UNDAF speaks to the 5-year program of the United Nations in any given country, the communications strategy speaks to how the communications group is going to support the implementation of the UNDAF in this 5-year period. So, of course, it's an overall document, it's a general document, the same way the UNDAF is, but the idea is to guide, to be like the sort of the guide for the UN communications group at country level. So once we have our communications strategy, the way to implement it, of course, and the way to implement it is through our communications work plans. And the communications work plans that you can see, oops, there's an arrow missing. So the communications strategy basically is being implemented through the communications work plan, and the communications work plan should be developed in collaboration with the results groups. I mean, this, as Peter explained in the slide, in the previous slide. Excuse me. So these communications work plans will support the implementation of the program objectives that the results groups will line up every year. And then once we have our communications work plans, we will have our communications activities, and the communications activities, of course, will be linked to the previous analysis that we will have done about audiences, the behavior of those audiences, the channels, the communication products, the timeline, and the budget. So in general, and I'm a communications person myself, in general, my experience is that, as Peter was saying before, communications is in general an afterthought. So it's whenever like a press release is needed, they call us. Whenever a poster is needed, whenever like an, I don't know, banner is needed, they call us, no? So unfortunately, because this is sometimes the way communications work on country level, the idea right now is to involve communications specialists in the UN, within the UN, in supporting program colleagues delivering on the program results outlined in the UNDAF. So how do we do this, and how do we ensure that we have the budget to do this? This is the main thing, which I think this slide speaks to, is that we need, the communications people needs to, the communications specialists need to be involved in the planning process of with our program colleagues, right? That's the only way we can ensure a budget, and that's the way we can also plan accordingly for any communications activities that we would like to develop. So this is like, in general, what this slide tries to explain, address. All the interlinkages between the UNDAF, the results group, the communications strategy, the communications work plan, and the activities, like from the more like abstract level to the more specific level. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. So that really is a helpful way to map out the different elements and how they fit together, and also how we can better marshal resources for communications and advocacy activities. So just to wrap up, there's one more critical element. Oh, I see there's more to this than okay. In the last stage of the UNDAF cycle is monitoring and evaluation. So this is an important milestone, which you know, basically is an opportunity for us to you know, we have a report, so we can, you know, communicate the content, and, you know, through social media, through other channels, you know, turning the content into micro content, you know, easily digestible chunks. But it's also an opportunity, you know, it really is a communications moment, because it's an opportunity to check in with those people whose interests we're serving, and to see how, you know, to see how well we are doing in responding to their needs. So really, you know, don't let it sit on a shelf, but actually use it as a great opportunity for outreach, communications, and as a way to check in with our stakeholders to see how well we are serving their needs, particularly the vulnerable and those who are farthest behind. And my penultimate slide is on the UNDAF evaluation. And again, I think this is the you know, and the last stop of the roadmap, but the last stop of the process, but it's a very important one. You know, use this as an opportunity to promote transparency, accountability. It can be used to communicate results. But again, I think there's lots of sort of communication activities that we can do around the evaluation, show how well we're doing, or also to show those areas where we need to work better together to work toward the SDGs. So I think that basically is, and I wanted to refer back to this slide because this nicely visualizes basically all of the entry points that we have been discussing today in the UNDAF design, development, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation stages. So, you know, and I will keep this slide. We have one more slide. It's basically just a thank you slide, but I want to keep this one up here so you can all see it to help us hone our questions and comments and any reactions, you know, because the guidance and all that we are talking about is really only as strong as we are at country level, because this is really where the rubber hits the road. So, you know, if you are also looking for, and I will show this slide, maybe I'll show this slide now, and then we'll go back to the other one in a moment, because this is a great opportunity to note that the Silo Fighters blog, the UNDG blog, is a really critical resource for learning and capturing stories about how we are doing communications and advocacy to further the achievement of the 2030 agenda. So it's you can see it at and read it at undg.org. It's called Silo Fighters, and it is also a critical resource. So let me just go back to this slide, as it might jog your memories about the presentation we've just given. We look forward to your questions and comments, and we can either read out your questions, but if you have a mic, we can really use this opportunity to have an interactive discussion. I can unmute you, and we can you know, have a discussion, a two-way discussion. So Maria, yeah. I think sees a question already.
Yes, we have our first question in this morning in New York, and it's from Jonathan Lewis. I hope I have pronounced your name correctly. UNICEF representative in Costa Rica and chair of the Interagency Communications Working Group. Excellent presentation, thank you very much, Jonathan. And our group is interested in finding out whether you have a roster of qualified consultants with experience in the development of communications and advocacy strategies under this new paradigm. Cheers, Jonathan.
Okay.
So that's Jonathan. I don't know if you want me to
maybe start, yeah? And then I'll pick up. Yeah.
So Jonathan, right now, unfortunately, we don't have a roster of qualified consultants as such, but we recently developed. We recently conducted a workshop in Bolivia, where 10 countries participated with more than 40 people, and it was a very hands-on workshop. And maybe some of the colleagues that participated there, that were from all Latin America and the Spanish Caribbean, could maybe support Costa Rica in the development of their strategies. We are also here, Peter and I, we are also available in case you need any support developing your communications and advocacy strategy. And if you want, we can definitely, not just for you, but the rest of the participants in the webinar, we can definitely put you in contact with people that might be able to help you on this effort. I don't know if you want to add anything, Peter, to that
No,
question.
I think that covers it. Yeah. I mean, Maria, as she mentioned, delivered a workshop in Bolivia, and I'm sure there are people there. You know, we're really looking to build a network of champions at country level who can speak to these issues, and support 131 country teams. We certainly stand here ready to answer queries, yes, and sort of troubleshoot issues and provide our experience. But also really a key area of support that we see is connecting colleagues across countries, colleagues that one colleague has a question, another one has an answer, and really bringing them together. So.
Okay, perfect. Jonathan has answered, and he will reach out to us. So thank you, Jonathan. We can follow up by email. And of course, for the rest of you that are interested, of course, you are always welcome to contact us. So the next question is from Wasi Lamini. How best, and the question is, how best can we leverage UNCT support in mainstreaming communications in the UNDAF planning stage? From Swaziland. Woo! Great. So, do you want to take this?
I'll start, and then
cool.
maybe you jump in.
Absolutely.
I think this is really important. You know, what we are really advocating for, and what the guidance actually is advocating for, is a new way of working that really, is a joined-up approach between program and communications. And I think that it is really critical that we begin by communicating. I think the first step is building sort of internal communications and building up, advocating for this new way of doing communications and advocacy to support program. So I would, one thing to add is to explain to colleagues, through, and Maria can also maybe touch on this a little bit more, through the UNCG or, through internal communications throughout the UNCT, to really explain the benefits of doing communications and advocacy in the way that we've just outlined today. Maria, do you want to add anything more specific?
Just to build on that, I think this is it's a great question, considering that that having the UNCT support is key for any communications activity. Maybe sometimes do kind of like our own advocate or our own internal advocacy sometimes, and explain to maybe UNCT colleagues, the UNCT and the representatives of the different agencies at country level, that this is kind of like the implications that this new agenda has for communications, and how these guidelines respond to them, right? And how there has been identified a need for communications colleagues to be involved in this in the UNDAF process. And of course, if you need like more detailed way of or more like tactics on how to do this, we can definitely share with you some examples of some countries that have already done this or are already doing this, and you are welcome to contact us for that.
Yes, and we really are very happy and willing to share, all the materials that we have, in terms of, for example, today's presentation. If you feel this would be helpful for you in making the case for mainstreaming communications in the UNDAF planning stage, we're happy to share the slides that we have presented today. So what I'm wondering whether maybe Jose, Ignacio, go on. I have a question. Do you want to? Maybe we should just voice him in.
Yes, I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
let's try to.
Nacho from Haiti.
Yes, Nacho from Haiti. We're going to try to voice you in. So I'm going to go to the attendees list and wait one moment. Let me just get to Nacho, and I'm going to unmute you if I can just find you. There we go. Okay, I'm going to unmute you. Okay, Jose, are you, Nacho,
Hello.
are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes,
Because
yes,
I've just unmuted your mic, and you said you had a question.
Yes,
so we're going to give you the opportunity to voice in your question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you for that presentation. So I have a question because
I don't.
Can you hear me?
Hear you. Let me just see.
Can you hear me?
He's having some troubles with the connection, I think.
Yeah, maybe there's
Can
some
you hear me?
connection issue.
Hello?
Let us know if you want to voice in your question, and you have the capability of doing that.
Hello?
We can we certainly
Can you hear me?
do
Can
that.
you hear me?
Maybe we
Hello?
take another question, Maria.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello?
You can? Yes. Thank you.
Oh, you know why? Because we are. Nacho, can you speak now?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me now?
It was our technical mishap. I'm so sorry.
So you can hear me now, right?
Yes, we
You
can.
can.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for that presentation. And so basically my question is because here in Haiti we were developing that new guidelines, and since I participated in one of the Communicating as One trainings with Maria, we received that support to try to put in, if you want to implement really that shift of the way we communicate. So we embedded communication focal points from the communication group in all the program, the result groups, and then our challenge in a way is that the UNDAF has the way we design the UNDAF. It's also a way in which you have different programs, specific programs, and the funding, the budget is one of the things that it's always uncertain. And we had also a previous Communicating as One strategy. and we wanted to give a continuity, which is based on the SDGs. So in a way, it's benefiting all the UNDAF programs. So our, in a way, solution, because we wanted to maintain both ways of working, we are now discussing a final proposal of one joint strategy, which in a way is in a way designed to support all the overall UNDAF process and different areas with activities. And at the same time, there is one part of this strategy which is only identified activities which are really linked to those programs and that were identified in each results group. So in a way, we have the joint strategy, which has different activities, and we have at least one or two activities per UNDAF results group. And for us, this is a way to maintain the continuity of the way we were working before, and to add those communication for results activities which are specifically linked to our program. So I wanted to ask if do you think this is a way that can work from your point of view? We think that maybe it's a solution. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think this, to me, this sounds great. I think this is a great example. You know, in particular, the way you've developed activities for results groups that emphasize that are about communicating for results.
Yeah.
To me, it's a very good example.
Yeah.
Maria, do you want to add anything on that?
No, exactly. I think it's a great example. Nacho, thank you for being part of this webinar and for sharing this experience. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate like countries that to hear back from countries that are already implementing this guidance, and I think yeah, that's definitely key. We have to move from just communicating our results to basically support our programs, call it achieving those results through communications. We have to start thinking about communications as a strategic tool that the system can use, not at country level and globally, to actually move forward this agenda. So I think these are great examples that you have shared with us. Yeah, thank you very much, Nacho.
No, thanks to
and
you.
Congratulations.
Thanks to you.
So I think we have another question from okay, Cynthia. Cynthia is asking, the slide that showed the UNCG leaders by agencies had UNDP as the lead agency. I did not see UNIC. Maybe you want to go back to the slide. I think UNIC is in the third. It's the third.
Wait a minute. One second, I have to sort of
minimize this. Yeah.
There.
And
Okay,
I think first is UNDP, next is UNICEF, and then next is the UNICs. Maybe it wasn't very clear from the from the slide, but it was there. And yes, 15 country teams globally are being chaired by UNICs, by the United Nations Information Center.
Yes.
So yeah, they are there, Cynthia. They
Yes.
are super important.
Yes, absolutely.
And they are key for communicating as one.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that question. And then she has another question. At what stage do you begin the drafting of the communications strategy? So yeah, in general, because the communications strategy has to answer the UNDAF, we will recommend to draft it once the UNDAF is kind of like in a draft stage, when like an agreement, like a final draft stage, when an agreement with the government has been taken, sort of, and then you can start like establishing your goals, etc. Because the ideal situation is that the communications group will have been involved at the UNDAF, at the design stage of the UNDAF, like Peter shared in the presentation. The idea is that the communications group will be already aware of the options that the group will have for communications to strategically support program objectives. So the idea, I think, will be to have the strategy ready when the UNDAF implementation starts. So maybe the year before of the UNDAF implementation could be the best time to agree on the strategy. In terms of the communication work plans, because the communication work plans are meant to align all the communications activities of all UN agencies towards achieving program goals, the idea will be that in terms of developing each year's work plan in the UNDAF implementation, I think November, December, when agencies start their planning process, that will be the best moment to start discussing about the future work plan of the United Nations Communications Group. So if the work plan is from 2020, the idea will be to start working on the previous work plan on 2019, November, December. But of course, that depends on the dynamics at country level. So there are two parts there. Yeah,
yep.
That's it.
And Cynthia wrote back saying thank you very much. So we hope that was helpful. And Pablo has a question, which I think is actually related. Would you consider Pablo from Bosnia-Herzegovina?
Sure.
Would you consider developing, sharing a simplified format of communication strategy with outline of mandatory elements and hints regarding approach? Yes, I mean, I think that this makes sense.
Yes.
And just keep in mind that really there are, before the strategy, if we look at that slide, just remember the communications roadmap, which really is an articulation of how, communications and advocacy can be used strategically to support program. And it sort of provides a broad brushstroke on how you will go about doing that. And then you have the, as Maria said, the communication strategy, which is more linked with the implementation of the UNDAF. But I think, yes, in terms of the timing, as Maria said, a year before would be a good time to start drafting the communication strategy.
I think it's a great idea, Pablo. Maybe we can come up with a simplified format for a communications strategy that maybe you could follow. We will get back to you on that. Thank you for the idea.
Great. So we have some other questions, and if you want to voice in your question, then feel free to let us know because we're happy to listen to you as well as to read what you write. Let me just. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's see.
You want to read Mozambique or?
Yeah. So we have a question from Mozambique from Geronimo Tovella. Good morning. Are there best practices on how best the UNCGs can get information on results? What I see is that results groups and M&E can take some time to have information ready for sharing due to coordination, reporting, and other challenges. I have the impression that either communications colleagues either get the information directly from the field or have to follow the results group calendar. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, as we mentioned, I think this is really, in terms of how to get information on results, it really argues for having strong linkages through the results groups, and this is really where colleagues from the UNCG should be sitting on each result group, and that's really the opportunity for all of us to get information on results. I don't know whether Maria, you want to add something.
That's it. I mean, that's the key. The key is to be sitting on these results groups. And of course, if the program colleagues cannot share results, it's because they cannot, I mean, they might not be available yet. However, you might be aware that these new UNDAF guidelines proposes to have an one UN results report like annually. So that will be, I think, if you are really interested in like working into sharing and showing UN results, that's your opportunity. Because if you might have like challenges to show it like in a monthly basis, because I understand maybe you can focus your communications activities in sharing like in a creative manner the process of the programming activities, which might not share like results immediately, but at least you are communicating what we are working on. That's one way. But then definitely an annual occasion to share what the UN has achieved at country level will be the annual results report that the UN is meant to develop every year. So those are two ways, I would say, that, yeah, maybe two opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
sitting in the results group is key for that. Yeah.
Let me just go back to that slide, and maybe we can also voice in. Juliana is asking a question, and I was thinking maybe we could have another. So this is what Maria was referring to, I think. This is what Maria was referring to earlier. You know, the integration between the UNCG and the results groups. Let me just see whether
Juliana, yeah.
I just want to see whether she can voice it. Not to put you on the spot, Juliana, but Juliana, can you? We see that you have a question. We wanted to give you the floor to ask your question. Can you do that now?
Can you hear me? My connection is a little bit weak. I don't know. Is it okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
My connection is a little bit delayed, I think.
We will read her question.
Okay, so we will read your question, Juliana. I'm going to mute you because we have some background noise going on there. Yeah, basically from Juliana, what is your suggestion to go about developing a budget during the UNDAF stage before the communication strategy is being developed? Yeah, this I think refers to, I just want to get to this slide here. Maybe Maria, you want to speak a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much for this question, Julian. This is Julian. Hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. This is very important, no? And this is kind of one of the key differences between how communications was sort of managed before and how we are proposing, well, the UNDG is proposing to actually use communications in a more strategic manner. And the budget is key, right? In general, my experience, like and Peter's experience, I think through like the different workshops that we have been conducted during the last 2 years, is that we have communications people have always challenges, right, to get the right budget to develop the needed communications and advocacy activities, and in terms of like including including a communications budget in the UNDAF development stage, I think as you might, I'm sure you are, you know much more than me about this, but the UNDAF budget is it's very broad. It basically captures the different regular resources that UN agencies have in general at country level to develop the UNDAF, and it's a little bit tricky in terms of like coming up with the communications, a specific communications budget within the UNDAF. That's why we understand, and this has been the discussion. But we are ready to learn from you guys. But that's why we are proposing to use the resource groups to actually plan the budget, the budgetary needs that communications might have. Because the UNDAF is so broad, and it doesn't really capture all the budget that from the very beginning of the of the country team in terms of like other resources that might that country teams might have because of, I don't know, like donor proposals or whatever. The idea will be to actually link the communications activities to the results groups work plans, because then you will have like an annual like an understanding in an annual basis of what UN agencies, funds and programs are going to do and how with their own budgets, right? And then you can actually, like, if you are there in this results group from the planning, from a planning stage, because these results group work plans are being planned every year. If communications is sitting on that table in the planning process, that's how you are going to manage to get the budget and to actually prioritize in terms of which communication activities the UN communications group can focus on. I think that's, I mean, that would be my first thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and just very quickly on that, you know, I think the question also talked about developing, you know, suggestion about developing budget during the UNDAF development stage, and that's really an opportunity for the common budgetary framework, I think. The goal here is to make sure that we have resources to fund strategic communication activities that really support program, and the common budgetary framework is an opportunity to make sure, you know, in the early stages of the UNDAF, to make sure that you know, you are incorporating those activities into your overall articulation of your budgeting needs, and you can, you know, use that with other partners for fundraising purposes. So I think that is, I hope that was helpful, Juliana, and let us know if you have any follow-up questions. We have some other questions as well. Maria, I don't know whether you've had a look or something.
Yeah, Nacho is asking, do you have in mind to have a common template with visuals for the One UN results? We are currently working in some templates to provide country teams with some layout options for the One UN results that you can adapt for also for the CC8s, the UNDAF, etc. This will be like InDesign templates that you will be able to adapt at country level. And in terms of like coming up with visuals, in terms of like maybe visualizing data, etc., if you are interested in doing that sort of exercise, kindly let us know, because we have identified, we have some partners here in HQ that maybe will be helpful for you, that you can tap into to actually visualize your results in case that is needed.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that question came from Pablo.
Nacho.
Nacho, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry about that, Nacho. So I think, let's see, we've covered, I think, this question on from Praise Nutakor. I think we've covered that on the role of the result group in the joint communication strategy development process. I think we've largely covered that, unless you want to add something that you think we've missed, Maria.
So the communications strategy, Praise, thank you very much for the question. So the question is, can you please explain the role of the results working group in the joint communications strategy development process again? So basically, the communications strategy is based on the UNDAF, right? When you develop this communications strategy to support the UNDAF implementation, you can definitely tap into the results group that are being arranged to deliver this UNDAF, right? So, for instance, you have, let's put us in the situation. You have an UNDAF, right? And then you convene your communications group to develop the strategy. The ideal way to do this will be to actually get the UNDAF outcomes, to have an understanding of, to have a discussion with UNCG members on how communications could support the implementation of the UNDAF outcomes. And it will be very good to have the program colleagues involved in this process. So, for instance, maybe you want to start, you want to have like a session with your UN communications colleagues for the communications strategy, and then once you have an outline on how communications can support the implementation of the UNDAF outcomes, maybe you want to include your program colleagues, maybe like the one or two leading agencies of each of the results group, in a session to explain them how communications can support the UNDAF outcomes, no? And then you can get their feedback, right? And when you have that agreement between the comms people and the programs people on how communications can be used to support the results groups, because that's eventually what a strategy will be about, right? You have the strategy, but the strategy is to actually guide the 5 work plans that you will have in order to support the results group work. So, so once you have that, you have the agreement of the communications group, you have the agreement of your program colleagues, and those will be the first 2 stages that that we will recommend before sharing maybe the communications strategy with the UN country team. That, and then once you have the agreement and the buy-in of the program colleagues in terms of objectives, activities, monitoring, and budget needs, requirements, and funding, I think we will be ready to share it with the UNCT for, of course, their further input. But when developing the communications strategy, that could be a way of involving the results groups colleagues in order to present to them how communications can help them and agree with them on the communications strategy objectives.
Thank you, Maria. Just to do a time check, it's 10:07 here in New York. We thought we'd go to 10:30 there, but you know, we'll only go as long as you have questions. We have maybe a couple more questions left. So if you have any questions which you'd like us to address, or comments, or field experience that you think would be really good for us to hear in this forum, please put a note in the question box, either question, comment, or let us know that you'd like to be voiced in. Jose, again, Nacho from Haiti,
yes,
had another
you should
question.
be sitting in the table with us.
Yeah. So maybe I will just unmute your microphone, Nacho, and then, so I'm unmuting you now.
Okay, hello. Yes, sorry, because the question I put, I think it's maybe a bit long to be written. So the main thing is about our experience here. We have 2 years, because this is the framework that we had for the previous communication strategy. We have a 2 years joint communication strategy. Now we are ending that one, and we are starting the new one. And as I said, we include as one of the pillars the activities in support to the UNDAF results group. But what you say is that every year we need a communication plan based on the UNDAF. So what the situation we have now is that we have kind of a double way. We have the 2 year strategy, and we have the different time frames and implementation calendars. At the same time, we will have a specific implementation calendar for those actions in support of the UNDAF, and we can frame them, of course, in a year period. But we have those 2 frameworks, time frames at the time. And we thought that in this way we can keep continuing doing, as I said, our strategy that we thought for 2 years it's better in the sense that it gives you a bigger picture, an overview, which is based on the SDGs. So do you think that adaptation could be acceptable, correct from your point of view? So we keep doing this way?
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction will be absolutely. I mean, this is what we are presenting here. These are guidelines, right? And eventually, you have to accommodate them to what best works at country level. So in your case, if you are developing, I mean, if your strategy is a short-term strategy for 2 years, and you already have like outlined your work plans for the next 2 years, wow, I mean, congratulations, you know, that's great. I mean, in general, and general is a little bit difficult to actually like plan in a 2-year framework, but if it's the case of Haiti, that is what works best for you, that's perfect. The idea of our proposal is to align communications work planning with the program work planning in order to sync them as much as possible, right? So that's kind of like the rationale behind what we are proposing. So results groups have a work plan, an annual work plan. Communications should be part of those annual work plans, right? Communications should be in the planning, implementation, and M&E process of those results work plans. That's and the end goal is to sync these two processes that right now we have identified are a little bit disconnected. But if 2 years is the time frame that Haiti wants to work with, yeah, absolutely, Nacho.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, but we in any case, we will do a report every year about the.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you so much.
Great. Yes. I mean, I think that you know, the purpose of the guidance, the UNDG guidance, is not to overburden ourselves with complex procedures and complicated things that we have to do that, you know, don't make sense at the country level. It's really about, you know, overall we want to link program and communications to program. And as Maria said, you know, we want to have a good way, sort of a light way to actually implement that at country level. And what Maria outlined makes a lot of sense. So I think we're sort of getting to the end of our questions. We have, there's a comment from Juliana. Thank you, Juliana. We won't try to voice you in. We've learned our lesson, but hopefully next time we will be able to. It would be great if you could share again some good practice examples for each of the different stages, strategy, work plan reports, if you have them available. I mean, I think, you know, we don't have at this stage any particular good practice examples, you know, of work plans. I mean, this is all new.
Yeah.
We're really at the beginning of something that's very fundamental change in the way we all work. So we're really looking actually to work together with you to help you you know, roll this out at country level and to communicate the importance of doing this to leadership and then actually implementing it at the UNCG level, at the results group level, at the level of work plans and things like that. So we really look forward to seeing your examples that then we can share across you know, across countries across the globe. So you know, so that's what I would say on that point. But thank you very much, Elena. It's really a good. We need to have a pool of examples.
Absolutely.
You know, but right now we're at the beginning stages of rolling this out.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I think we are.
Luazi has a question.
Yes, we have a question. Let's see. We have a question from Luazi Dlamini, and the question is, what is the UNDG guidance on sharing of the communications guidelines at country level, especially to the UNCT? Should they be shared by the UNCG or the RCO? I mean, I think the UNCG is really the key sort of, you know, communications coordination mechanism, and I think that you know, that's where colleagues sit from the different agencies. So I would use that as sort of the key forum through which to communicate, but then also, you know, to find opportunities to articulate this new way of working across the UNCT. Maria, would you want to?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's the UNCG, the main body for interagency communications in the system at country level. So maybe, I don't know, maybe the first stage, I don't know what the situation, I'm apologies, Luasi, because I don't know from which country you are writing, but I think it's Swaziland, no? Was it Swaziland? Yeah, I think it was Swaziland. So yeah, so the idea will be to first share with the communications group these new guidelines, right? And then maybe agree on how to better present them to the UNCT. But I think it should be, I agree with Peter, I think it should be the UN communications group.
Right.
Right. I don't know if the case of Swaziland, whether like a representative is chairing the group or not, but maybe it will be, I don't know, that representative as part of the UNCT or either communications colleague. But that is definitely a decision that has to be taken at country level, and especially in the framework of the UN's communications group, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that question, Luazi. I think we are slowly running to the end of the comments and questions from your side. So I'll begin to sort of wrap up and you know, give Maria also the opportunity to say a few closing words. Basically, you know, in the way of wrap up, I just want to say this has really been a fantastic opportunity to communicate with all of you. I think, you know, in getting so, you know, we presented the new guidance, but really, you know, this is about field testing, and to hear the questions that you have are really helpful for us to see what are some of the critical issues that you are, you know, that you have in actually rolling this out. So I would, you know, make a plug once again for Silo Fighters, which is the UNDG blog, and I'm going to put on our last slide there. So you know, use that as a resource, and two things: use it as a resource to read about country stories of how they're actually going about implementing advocacy for the SDGs, plus on a range of other issues. It's really a chronicle of how colleagues are breaking down silos, working together to implement this broad new agenda. And secondly, you know, we really love to hear from you on this platform to see whether, you know, if you have an idea for a blog, please feel free to send it to us, and you know, we can also help you editorially to sort of develop your ideas into a blog post. But you know, also on the One UN Knowledge Exchange, this is on the Yammer platform, we have an interagency group on communications and advocacy, UN communications and advocacy. If you would like to access this group, please just feel free to send either Maria or myself an email, and we can help you join this network. But it's really an opportunity to also share questions, pain points, and other issues as you go about rolling this new agenda out. I think that is all I have to say. It's been really great sitting here with Maria and the both of us. I think it's been a really fantastic experience. Maria, do you want to add anything? Or?
No, thank you. Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone for taking the time to make communications strategic at country level. And yeah, we are here to support you. So please let us know how we can help. And yeah, thank you again. That's it on my side.
Okay, great. So on that note, we're going to call this webinar to a close, and we look forward to staying in touch with you via email on the One UN Knowledge Exchange. We look forward to seeing all your success stories on the Silo Fighters blog.
Yeah.
It's been really great, a really good experience, and this webinar has been recorded, and we will share the recording. So if you'd like to listen to it again, if there's a morsel that you missed, then please feel free to. We will distribute that to you. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.